If you love true courtroom twists and jaw-dropping reveals, you're in the right place. Subscribe, share, and stick around, because this is the story of how one man went from the brink of losing everything to winning it all with just one envelope. At the court hearing, she smiled like she'd already won, until my lawyer handed the judge one envelope audio confession. Duration, 12:47. I'm recording this because I need to get it out. It's been 6 months since the hearing, and I still wake up some mornings thinking about that moment when everything changed. Not with anger anymore, that's long gone, but with something closer to wonder. How quickly the truth can shift everything. How one envelope can undo months of lies. Let me start at the beginning. Sarah and I met at a coffee shop downtown. Cliché, I know, but there it is. She was reading Sylvia Plath, and I made some comment about the bell jar. She laughed, this bright, infectious laugh that made me forget I was supposed to be studying for the bar exam. We were both 26, both ambitious, both so sure we had it all figured out. The first 3 years were good, really good. We moved in together after 8 months, got married 2 years later in her parents' backyard. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. I remember thinking, as she walked toward me in that simple white dress, that I was the luckiest man alive. But somewhere around year 4, things started to shift. Small things at first. She'd question my decisions more, challenge everything I said with this edge that hadn't been there before. When I got promoted to partner at the firm, instead of celebrating, she said I was becoming one of those lawyers, cold, money-obsessed. When I suggested we start trying for kids, she accused me of wanting to trap her. I tried to talk to her about it. God, how I tried. But every conversation became an argument. Every argument became my fault. I was too controlling, too demanding, too focused on work, too distant when I wasn't working. There was no winning. The divorce papers came on a Tuesday. I was at the office reviewing contracts when my secretary knocked and handed me the envelope. Sarah's signature at the bottom, next to her lawyer's, a woman named Patricia Kellerman, who had a reputation for being ruthless in family court. But it wasn't just divorce papers. Sarah was claiming emotional abuse, manipulation. She painted a picture of our marriage that I barely recognized. Herself as the victim of a controlling, potentially dangerous man. She was asking for the house, half my retirement, and a restraining order. I sat in my office that night until nearly midnight, reading through her claims over and over. According to Sarah, I had isolated her from friends, monitored her phone calls, threatened her when she tried to leave. None of it was true. None of it. But it was all there in black and white, signed and notarized. My lawyer, David Chen, was blunt when we met the next morning. "She's going nuclear," he said, spreading the papers across his desk. "These are serious allegations. Even if we prove them false, the mere accusation can damage your career. She knows that." The months leading up to the hearing were the darkest of my life. The restraining order meant I couldn't go home. I was staying in a hotel room downtown, eating takeout and trying to figure out how my life had collapsed so completely. Friends started treating me differently. Not hostile, exactly, but careful. Distant. Word spreads fast in a small legal community. Sarah's social media told a different story. She was out with friends constantly, posting photos of herself looking radiant and free. "Starting my new chapter," one caption read, "finally learning what happiness feels like." The comments were full of support from people I'd considered mutual friends. "So proud of you for getting out. You deserve so much better. Stay strong." I stopped looking after a while. David worked methodically, building our defense. Character witnesses, financial records showing I'd never controlled her spending, phone records, email chains. But Sarah's story was compelling in its simplicity. Successful lawyer emotionally abuses his wife until she finally finds the courage to leave. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that laugh in the coffee shop, about the woman in the white dress, about how we'd gotten from there to here. I wasn't angry anymore, I was just exhausted. Hollow. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Judge Morrison was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes. Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table with Patricia Kellerman, wearing a navy blue dress that made her look vulnerable and professional at once. She'd lost weight. Her hair was shorter, styled differently. She looked like someone I used to know. When our eyes met briefly, she didn't look away. Instead, she gave me this small, almost pitying smile. Like she was sorry it had come to this, but what choice did she have? Patricia Kellerman was good. Very good. She walked the judge through Sarah's allegations methodically, painting me as a man who'd gradually isolated and controlled his wife until she'd felt trapped in her own home. Sarah took the stand and spoke in a quiet, steady voice about feeling afraid to disagree with me, about how I'd made her feel small and worthless. She cried once, not dramatically, just a few tears when describing the night she'd finally decided to leave. I realized I didn't recognize myself anymore, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I'd become this person who was afraid to have opinions, afraid to see friends, afraid to be myself. I watched Judge Morrison's face. She was listening intently, occasionally making notes. David's cross-examination was gentle but thorough. He pointed out inconsistencies in Sarah's timeline, asked about specific incidents she'd described. But Sarah was prepared. For every question, she had an answer. She'd clearly spent months thinking through her story, making sure all the pieces fit. When it was our turn, David called our character witnesses. My law partners, Sarah's own sister, who testified reluctantly that she'd never seen signs of abuse. A neighbor who said Sarah had always seemed happy and confident when they'd talked. But I could feel the weight of Sarah's allegations hanging over everything. In cases like this, the burden of proof is tricky. How do you prove you didn't do something? How do you demonstrate the absence of control, of manipulation, of emotional abuse? I was starting to think we might lose. Then, during the lunch recess, David pulled me aside. "There's something I need to show you," he said. He opened his briefcase and withdrew a manila envelope. My investigator finished going through Sarah's phone records yesterday, her deleted messages. He handed me printouts of text conversations, Sarah and her sister, Sarah and Patricia Kellerman, Sarah and someone named Marcus, a name I didn't recognize. I read in silence, my hands shaking slightly. Sarah to her sister. The emotional abuse angle is perfect, impossible to prove or disprove. Patricia says judges are very sympathetic. Sarah to Patricia. I've been documenting everything, creating a paper trail, making sure there's a pattern. Sarah to Marcus. Just a few more months and I'll be free, with half his money. Then we can be together properly. Marcus. I scrolled through their conversations. They'd been having an affair for over a year. Planning my financial ruin while planning their future together. Marcus to Sarah. Are you sure this will work? What if he fights back? Sarah to Marcus. He won't. He's too much of a Boy Scout, too ethical. He'll just take it and try to move on with his life. I looked up at David. How did you get these? Sarah's cloud backup. She thought she'd deleted everything, but it was all still there. My guy's very thorough. When we returned to the courtroom, Sarah was already seated, talking quietly with Patricia. She looked confident, relaxed, like someone who'd already won. Judge Morrison called us back to order. David stood and cleared his throat. Your Honor, before we continue, I'd like to present some additional evidence that came to light during the lunch recess. He walked to the bench and handed Judge Morrison the manila envelope. Sarah's face didn't change, but I saw Patricia Kellerman lean forward slightly, frowning. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of papers being shuffled. Judge Morrison read for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. I watched Sarah's face as the silence stretched on. The confidence was still there, but something else had crept in around the edges. Uncertainty. Finally, Judge Morrison looked up. Her expression had changed completely. Ms. Patterson, she said, addressing Sarah directly, are you familiar with the contents of these text messages? Sarah's composure cracked for just a moment. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Your Honor. Judge Morrison read aloud. The emotional abuse angle is perfect. Impossible to prove or disprove. Her voice was steady but cold. I've been documenting everything. creating a paper trail. The color drained from Sarah's face. Patricia Kellerman was frantically flipping through papers, clearly trying to understand what had just happened. Judge Morrison continued reading. The affair. The planning. The calculated destruction of my reputation for financial gain. With each text message, Sarah seemed to shrink in her chair. When the judge finished, the courtroom was completely silent. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the tick of the wall clock, someone shifting in their seat behind me. Ms. Patterson, Judge Morrison said finally, do you have anything to say about these messages? Sarah tried to speak, but no words came. She looked at Patricia, who just shook her head slightly. I felt something I hadn't expected, not vindication or satisfaction, but a deep, profound sadness. This was the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd married, and she'd spent months carefully constructing lies designed to destroy me. Judge Morrison's ruling was swift and decisive. The restraining order was dissolved immediately. All claims of abuse were dismissed. Sarah would receive nothing beyond her personal belongings. She was ordered to pay my legal fees. But more than that, and this surprised me, Judge Morrison referred the case to the district attorney's office for potential perjury charges. As the courtroom cleared, Sarah finally looked at me directly. The confidence was gone. The pity was gone. There was just something raw and desperate in her eyes. I never meant for it to go this far, she said quietly. I stood there for a moment, looking at this stranger who used to be my wife. Yes, you did, I said finally. That was always the plan. She opened her mouth to say something else, but I was already walking away. 6 months later, I'm in a different place entirely. Not just physically, though I did buy a new house, smaller but with better light, but emotionally. The anger is gone. The hurt has faded to something manageable. What's left is a kind of clarity I didn't expect. I learned something about truth that I'd never fully understood before. It has weight. It has substance. It sits there, patient and immutable, waiting to be discovered. Lies require constant maintenance, constant energy. Truth just is. Sarah pled guilty to perjury and received community service and probation. Marcus, it turned out, was married too. His wife left him when everything came out. Sarah had to move back in with her parents. I don't take any satisfaction in that. I just find it inevitable. Like gravity. People ask me if I'll ever trust anyone again, if I'll ever remarry. I don't know, but I know I'm not afraid anymore. Not of being alone, not of being lied to, not of fighting for the truth when it matters. The truth has weight, and in the end, that weight is enough. End of recording.